Welcome back. So, when you look at how India is governed, you hear these terms thrown around a lot. Union government, central government, federal government, sometimes all in the same breath. Well, it can be a bit confusing, can it?
It absolutely can. And that very confusion is actually central to what we're digging into today. Because the real answer isn't just in the words on paper in the Constitution, but how power is actually used, how it's practiced.
We're talking about federalism then, this idea of dividing power vertically.
Exactly. And it's a huge deal globally. I mean, think about it. Only about 25 countries in the world are technically federal, but, and this is the kicker, they include most of the really big ones.
Right.
So these federal countries, they contain something like 40% of the entire world's population. If you've got a large, diverse country, chances are it's a federation.
And India, with its sheer scale, I mean, hundreds of languages, diverse cultures, all these different regional histories, how that power gets shared, it feels absolutely fundamental, foundational, really.
Precisely. That's our mission today, to sort of unpack this Indian federal puzzle. We need to get a handle on the theory, sure, but more importantly, how India's political life, its democratic journey, has actually shaped that structure.
To do those two big things at once.
Yes, exactly. Promote national unity and accommodate all that incredible regional diversity. It's a balancing act. We'll see that the success story of Indian federalism, such as it is really about adapting the written rules through political reality, through necessity.
Okay, let's unpack this then, starting with the basics. If I'm trying to grasp federalism, how is it really different from just having one main government running everything, a unitary system?
Okay, the absolute core difference is independence. Federalism means power is divided,
Right.
split between a central authority and the various parts, states, provinces, whatever they're called.
Okay.
But crucially, in a true federation, those state governments, they have their own powers. Powers they exercise independently. They aren't answerable to the central government for those powers.
So they answer directly to the people within that state.
Directly to you, the citizen within that state. That's the key. The central government can't just, unilaterally change the rules for state powers or dissolve a state government just because it feels like it.
Right, that makes sense. Can we see this difference play out somewhere?
Yeah, look at the contrast between, say, Belgium and Sri Lanka. It's quite telling. Before 1993, Belgium was, well, essentially unitary. Regional governments existed, sure, but their powers weren't constitutionally guaranteed. The central government could theoretically pull them back.
Okay.
But then, in 1993, Belgium made a deliberate shift, became federal, and those regional governments gave proper constitutional powers. Powers the central government could not just take away on its own.
That constitutional guarantee seems like the absolute bedrock then. And Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, for the most part, remains unitary. The national government holds the ultimate power, and that's precisely why Tamil leaders there have, for a long time, argued for a federal setup. They want that guaranteed autonomy, not just powers delegated from the center, which could be withdrawn.
So this guarantee, it's built on some specific features, I guess, things that define a federation.
Yes, there are common threads. We don't need to get bogged down in a checklist, but think about the essentials. First, you obviously need at least two levels or tiers of government, center and states.
Got it. 2 tiers.
Second, and this is vital, each tier has its own defined jurisdiction. That's basically its legally defined territory of authority, what it can make laws about, what it can tax, how it administers things. Each level has its own sandbox to play in, so to speak.
And crucially, those sandboxes are protected.
By the Constitution itself. That's the third point, really. The jurisdictions are constitutionally guaranteed, which leads to the fourth aspect, rigidity.
Meaning it's hard to change.
Very hard, especially the fundamental parts about power sharing. To stop the central government just accumulating power, changing these core rules requires agreement from both levels of government. It can't be a unilateral decision.
Okay, what if they disagree on the rules?
That's where the courts come in. Point 5. An independent judiciary acts as the umpire, interprets the Constitution, settles disputes between the central government and the states, or even between states.
Makes sense. And finally, money.
Always follow the money. Financial autonomy is key. So the sixth point is that the sources of revenue for each level of government need to be clearly specified in the Constitution. Ensures states aren't completely dependent on the center for funds.
So it sounds like a complex structure. Does how a federation is formed affect how this power balance works out in practice?
Oh, absolutely. History matters hugely here. There are broadly two ways federations come into being. First is the coming together route.
Like the U.S.
Exactly. The USA, Switzerland, Australia, you had independent states or colonies deciding to, well, come together to form a bigger union. They pool sovereignty for mutual benefit, but they usually retain significant powers and often have equal status relative to each other. States tend to be quite strong.
But India wasn't like that. It was already a large entity under British rule.
Correct. India fits the second model, the holding together federation, along with countries like Spain or Belgium more recently. Here, a large, diverse country decides to divide its existing power between the national government and regional units.
Why do that?
Usually for better administration and, crucially, to accommodate diversity, to give different regions some autonomy. But because the power is being divided from the center outwards, the central government often tends to retain more power compared to the states. And another feature, the constituent units, the states, might actually have unequal powers. Some might have more autonomy than others.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. So India being a holding together federation, how did the Constitution actually set up this power structure? Interestingly, it calls India a union of states. Doesn't explicitly say federation.
It doesn't use the word federal, that's true, but the entire structure is based on federal principles.
Yeah.
The way it divides power is clearly federal in nature. It does this mainly through a very clear threefold distribution of legislative powers. Think of it like three distinct lists of responsibilities.
Right, the famous lists. Let's start with the first one, the union list.
Okay, the union list covers things that absolutely need a uniform national policy. Think defense, foreign affairs, banking, currency, communications, stuff that affects the entire country in the same way.
So only the central government, the union government, can make laws on these.
That's right. Only the union government. It's about national importance, national security, the economy's backbone.
Okay. Then comes the state list. This must be the regional stuff.
Exactly. This is where day-to-day governance that varies by region comes in. Things like police, local trade and commerce, agriculture, irrigation, subjects of state and local importance. Here, only the state governments generally have the authority to make laws. This allows policies to be tailored to specific local needs.
Makes sense. Police function differently in different states. Agriculture varies massively. But what about areas where both levels might have an interest?
That brings us to the third list, the concurrent list. This covers areas like education, forests, marriage, adoption, trade unions, things where both the union and the state governments might have a legitimate interest.
So both can make laws here. What happens if they clash?
Both can legislate, yes. It allows for cooperation and shared responsibility, but, and this shows the holding together bias again, if there's a conflict between a union law and a state law on a concurrent list subject, the union law prevails. The central law overrides the state law.
Interesting. So there's an overlap, but with a clear hierarchy in case of disagreement. What about subjects that weren't even imagined when the Constitution was written, like, say, cyber laws or genetic engineering?
Good question. Those fall under what are called residuary subjects, anything not mentioned in the three lists. And according to the Indian Constitution, the power to make laws on these residuary subjects rests exclusively with the union government, again, reinforcing the center's position.
You mentioned earlier that holding together federations often have unequal powers among states. How does that play out in India specifically?
We see that quite clearly. It's not a perfectly symmetrical system. On one hand, you have certain states granted special status. Article 371 of the Constitution, for example, gives special provisions to states like Nagaland, Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Mizoram.
Why is that?
It's often due to their unique social and historical circumstances. These provisions protect the rights of indigenous peoples, their land, their culture, sometimes giving them preferences in government employment. It was a way to make sure these regions felt secure and integrated into India while preserving their identity.
So some states get extra powers or protections. What's the flip side?
The flip side is the union territories. These are areas often quite small like Chandigarh or Lakshadweep, or strategically important like Delhi or Puducherry that aren't full states.
And they have less power.
Much less. They don't have the same autonomy as states. They are administered largely by the central government. The lieutenant governor, appointed by the center, often holds significant power. So you have this spectrum, special status states, regular states, and union territories with very limited powers. It shows the system adapting, maybe unevenly, to different needs.
Okay, so this whole structure, the lists, the special statuses, the UTs, it's all laid out in the Constitution.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to actually change these fundamental power-sharing arrangements?
It's designed to be really, really difficult, and that difficulty is in itself a key feature of federalism. It protects the states from having their powers altered easily by the center.
How so? What's the process?
For any fundamental change to the way power is shared, say changing the legislative lists or the status of states, it's a two-stage, very high bar. First, the change must be passed by both houses of parliament, the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, with a special majority. Not just a simple majority, but a majority of the total membership of the House and a majority of at least two-thirds of the members present and voting.
Okay, that's already tough.
But that's not all. After it passes parliament, it then needs to be ratified, meaning approved, by the legislatures of at least half of all the states in India.
Wow, so you need buy-in from both the center and a significant number of the states.
Exactly. It ensures that the federal balance can't be easily tilted. The structure is constitutionally entrenched.
Right. This constitutional framework, this rigidity you describe, it really sets the stage, doesn't it? Because if the written rules are hard to change, then the real story, the success or failure of federalism, must lie in how it's actually practiced day to day in the politics.
Absolutely. Here's where it gets really interesting. Constitutional provisions are necessary, but they're definitely not sufficient. The true spirit of federalism, its success, is shaped by the nature of democratic politics in the country.
So how has India's democracy tested and shaped its federalism? What are the big examples?
Well, the first major test, right after independence, and perhaps one of the most consequential, was the creation of linguistic states.
This was a huge reorganization, wasn't it? Drawing state boundaries based on language.
Massive. If you look at a map of India from 1947 and compare it to one from, say, the 1970s or even today, the internal boundaries are radically different. Many new states were created: Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Punjab, Haryana, primarily based on shared language. And later, some states were also formed based on culture, ethnicity, or geography, like Nagaland, Uttarakhand, Jharkhand.
Was this controversial at the time?
Hugely controversial. Many national leaders, including Nehru initially, were deeply worried. They feared that creating states based on language would fuel regionalism, perhaps even lead to the disintegration of the country. They worried it would weaken national unity.
But that's not what happened, is it?
Quite the opposite, surprisingly. Experience showed that forming linguistic states actually made the country more united. It reduced conflict. People felt their language and culture were recognized and respected within the federal structure. It also, arguably, made administration easier as state governments could operate in the regional language.
That's fascinating. The very thing they feared would divide actually strengthened unity. What was the next big test?
Language policy itself. Beyond just state boundaries, how India managed its incredible linguistic diversity was critical.
Unlike Sri Lanka, perhaps.
Exactly. India learned from potential pitfalls. Crucially, the Constitution did not designate any single language as the national language. Hindi was identified as the official language of the Union, but even that was sensitive.
Because Hindi isn't spoken by everyone.
Not even close. It's the mother tongue of only about 40% of Indians. Recognizing this, the Constitution protected other major languages. There are currently 22 languages recognized as scheduled languages.
So you can take government exams in these languages, for example.
Yes. Candidates for central government positions can opt to take exams in many of these languages. States have their own official languages too, but the real test came with English.
Ah, the colonial legacy.
Indeed. The original plan was for the use of English for official purposes to stop in 1965. But the non-Hindi speaking states, particularly in the South, strongly protested. They feared Hindi imposition.
What happened?
There were widespread protests, some violent, and the central government, showing crucial flexibility and pragmatism, backed down. They agreed to continue the use of English alongside Hindi for official purposes indefinitely. This compromise was vital. It prevented the kind of linguistic conflict that tore Sri Lanka apart and helped hold India together.
So accommodating linguistic demands, both in terms of states and official language use, was key. What about the power dynamics between the center and the states? How has that evolved?
That's the third major area where practice shaped federalism, center-state relations. This has been a real roller coaster. For many years after independence, say up to around 1990, one party, the Congress Party, dominated both at the center and in most of the states.
What did that mean for federalism?
Well, it often meant that the federal spirit wasn't fully respected. When the same party was in power everywhere, the central government sometimes didn't hesitate to undermine or dismiss state governments run by opposition parties. Article 356 of the Constitution, allowing the center to impose president's rule, was sometimes misused. State governments didn't always feel truly autonomous.
But things changed dramatically after 1990, right?
Dramatically, the political landscape fragmented. We saw the rise of powerful regional parties based in different states. This meant that single-party dominance at the center ended. The era of coalition governments began.
So the central government needed the support of these regional parties to stay in power.
Precisely. Suddenly, the central government had to negotiate with and respect regional parties and the state governments they ran. They couldn't just ride roughshod over them anymore. This ushered in a new culture of power sharing and greater respect for the autonomy of states.
And the courts played a role, too.
Yes, crucially, around the same time, the Supreme Court delivered important judgments that made it much more difficult for the central government to arbitrarily dismiss state governments under Article 356. So political necessity, the rise of coalitions, combined with judicial assertion, really strengthened the federal structure in practice.
It seems like Indian federalism has been quite adaptive, then evolving through these political tests. This brings us to another layer of government you mentioned earlier, the third tier. Why did India feel the need to go beyond just the center and the states?
Well, think about the scale again. Even India's states are enormous and incredibly diverse internally. Uttar Pradesh, as you know, has a population larger than Russia. Maharashtra is about the size of Germany.
Right, managing things efficiently within such huge states must be a challenge.
Exactly. Many problems and issues are best solved at the local level. Think about village roads, local water supply, primary schools, sanitation. People living in a village or a town have the best knowledge of their local problems and priorities. Decentralization, creating this third tier, was about bringing democracy and decision-making closer to the people.
Making democracy more direct, more participatory.
That's the idea. It allows for direct participation of people in decisions that affect them daily. It's also supposed to make governance more efficient and accountable. But for a long time, these local bodies, panchayats in villages and municipalities and towns were quite weak. They often didn't have regular elections, enough power, or enough resources.
So what changed? When did this third tier become properly established?
The big step, the real constitutional empowerment, happened in 1992 with major constitutional amendments, the 73rd and 74th Amendment.
What do they do?
They made local self-government a constitutional requirement, not just an option. They introduced 5 key mandatory provisions. First, it became constitutionally mandatory to hold regular elections to these local government bodies every 5 years.
Taking the power away from state governments to postpone elections indefinitely?
Precisely. Second, seats were reserved in these elected bodies for scheduled castes, SCs, scheduled tribes, STs, and other backward classes, OBCs, ensuring representation for marginalized communities.
That's significant for social justice.
Immensely significant. Third, and this was truly revolutionary, at least 1/3 of all positions, including the leadership positions like sarpanch or mayor, were reserved for women.
1/3 for women. That must have drastically changed local politics.
It absolutely did. Fourth, an independent institution called the State Election Commission was created in each state to conduct these panchayat and municipal elections, ensuring they were free and fair.
Similar to the Election Commission of India for national and state elections.
Exactly the same principle. And fifth, the amendments required state governments to share some of their powers and revenue with these local government bodies. The exact nature and extent of this sharing varies from state to state, but the principle was established.
So what does this local government structure look like on the ground?
In rural areas, it's known as Panchayati Raj. At the village level, you have the Gram Panchayat, which is the elected council, usually headed by a sarpanch or president. The panchayat functions under the overall supervision of the Gram Sabha, which is literally all the adult voters registered in that village. It's supposed to be direct democracy in action.
And above the village level?
Gram panchayats are grouped together to form what's usually called a panchayat samiti, or block, or mandal, and all the panchayat samitis within a district collectively form the Zilla Parishad, the district council. In urban areas, you have a similar structure with municipalities for smaller towns and municipal corporations for big cities, usually headed by a mayor.
The scale of this is just mind-boggling when you think about it. How many elected officials are we talking about across India in this third tier?
It's estimated there are now about 36 lakh, that's 3.6 million elected representatives in these panchayats and municipalities across the country.
3.6 million. That number alone is larger than the entire population of many countries.
It is. It represents the largest experiment in direct democracy anywhere in the world. It has definitely helped deepen democracy by taking it to the grassroots level. And as we mentioned, it's dramatically increased the political representation and participation of women and marginalized groups.
So what does this all mean when we look back at this whole journey?
I think it means that India's federalism isn't some static blueprint from a textbook. It's alive, it's dynamic, it's often messy. Its success, where it has succeeded, lies in this constant process of negotiation and adaptation. Taking a constitutional framework that started somewhat centralized, this holding together model, and making it work through democratic politics.
Adapting to linguistic diversity, evolving center-state power dynamics through coalitions, and then deepening democracy right down to the village level.
Exactly. Balancing that need for national unity with the undeniable reality of India's vast diversity. From recognizing linguistic states to empowering local village councils, it's been a story of political practice shaping constitutional theory.
But it's not a perfect story, is it? You mentioned challenges with the third tier earlier. The sources we looked at highlight some ongoing issues.
That's right. While creating this massive third tier with 3.6 million representatives is a huge achievement, the reality on the ground is often still challenging. The source material notes that Gram Sabhas, those crucial meetings of all village voters, are often not held regularly. They're meant to be the soul of local accountability, but, well, practice lags behind theory.
And the power and money. Have state governments really devolved significant resources?
That's the other major issue highlighted. Most state governments have, frankly, been reluctant to transfer significant powers and adequate financial resources to the local bodies. So many panchayats and municipalities remain dependent on state governments and lack real autonomy to function effectively.
So we're still quite a distance away from realizing the full potential, the ideal of local self-government.
Definitely. We're still a long way off. So perhaps a final thought for you, our listeners, to ponder. We know about inspiring examples of genuine decentralization elsewhere, like the participatory budgeting process in Porto Alegre, Brazil, where ordinary citizens get directly involved in deciding parts of the city budget. We even have examples within India, like experiments in Kerala. Considering these, what more does India need to do? What steps are needed to ensure that these 3.6 million local representatives can truly fulfill their potential and make local self-government a powerful, everyday reality for people across the country?